He was carrying a soldier's memory across the sky. But when the airline disrespected the mission, angry-faced strangers stood up and honor was restored. Dove Red Heart before diving into the story. Comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. A flight with a mission. It was supposed to be just another flight. But for one man, it was the most important journey of his life. The airport buzzed with the usual energy of a typical morning. Boarding announcements echoed, children tugged at tired parents, business travelers scrolled through emails, and airport staff moved swiftly through routine motions. No one paid much attention to the man in uniform sitting silently near the terminal window. That he looked calm, still, focused, not lost in his phone, not reading, not even people watching, just sitting, waiting. What those around him didn't know was that this wasn't just another flight. For him, this was sacred. This was a mission. He wasn't flying to see family. He wasn't flying home for leave. He was escorting a fallen hero, a soldier, his best friend. They had enlisted together, trained side by side, fought through storms and silence. Brothers not by blood, but by battle. They made a pact when they deployed. If something happens, you get me home. Now, that promise was all he had left to keep. His friend had died in the line of duty during a routine patrol overseas. A surprise attack. Quick, brutal, unforgiving. There had been no chance to say goodbye. The military has a time-honored tradition. When a soldier dies in service, another service member is assigned to accompany the body back home. Not just for logistics, but for honor. That escort makes sure the fallen is treated with dignity every step of the way, from the foreign battlefield to American soil, to the family who waits with shattered hearts. This soldier had volunteered. Not because it was his duty, though it was, but because this was his person, his closest friend, the one who always had his back. Now, it was his turn to return that loyalty. He had spent the last 24 hours navigating military transport, base handoffs, and endless paperwork. And now, he sat at a civilian gate, holding a folded set of papers in one hand and his military-issued cap in the other. Outside the window, unknown to the passengers nearby, a casket wrapped in an American flag had already been carefully loaded into the cargo hold of the plane. The soldier had watched it with a clenched jaw and glassy eyes, standing at attention as it was handled with reverence by the military transport team. No one else had noticed. He didn't expect applause. He didn't want special treatment. But there were military procedures for this kind of flight. The escort was supposed to pre-board, to sit in a specific area so he could be among the first. Off the plane, when they landed, he was supposed to stand beside the cargo hold as the casket was removed, silent, present, representing the uniform, the friendship, and the sacrifice for the family waiting on the other side. This mattered. For the memory of his friend, it mattered. But for now, he just sat and waited, alone in a crowded room. People glanced at him occasionally. A few passengers smiled politely. A couple of kids stared with wide eyes, not quite understanding the weight in his expression. But for the most part, he blended in. There was something heartbreakingly noble about it all. No fanfare, no welcome home signs, no recognition. Just a man on a mission of love and loss. That he stared out at the tarmac, not blinking, probably remembering their last conversation, probably replaying the laughter, the bad jokes, the way they promised they'd both make it home, but they didn't. Not both of them. Now, it was up to him to carry the weight for both. This wasn't a vacation. This wasn't a job. This was a final goodbye. And as the boarding announcement echoed across the terminal, no one realized that one of the most sacred duties of military service was quietly unfolding in their midst. The soldier was bringing another soldier home. And for him, this flight would be the hardest of his life. Trouble at the gate. But just as he prepared to board, everything started going wrong. The boarding call crackled over the intercom. First class, military, and special assistants were invited to board. He stood quietly, gathering his things. His shoulders squared. His jaw set. The time had come. This was it. The final leg of the journey home for his best friend, the fallen soldier he had sworn to accompany from the battlefield. To his family's arms, as he approached the gate, he didn't expect applause. He didn't want recognition. He just needed to do what he had been trained to do. With calm professionalism, he handed the gate agent his boarding pass and his military escort documents. "I'm traveling as an official escort for a fallen service member," he said, voice steady but low. Per protocol, I'll need to board early to coordinate with the crew. But the agent barely looked up. She sighed, typing into her computer without making eye contact. We're not doing early boarding right now, she said flatly. You'll have to wait until your group's called. He paused, thinking maybe she hadn't understood. He repeated, more clearly, ma'am, I'm the escort for a deceased soldier. The casket is already on board. I've got military orders. I need to be on that plane ahead of general boarding. Still, the response came cold. Sir, like I said, we're not allowing exceptions. You'll board with your group. He glanced around, trying to stay calm. His training told him to remain respectful, even under stress. But something about this moment, this disrespect, cut deep. He pulled out a folder and carefully opened it, showing her the official military transport orders, signed and sealed. This is not a request for special treatment, he said. This is protocol. This is standard procedure for military escorts. Still nothing. Just a frustrated shake of her head and another dismissive, I'm sorry, sir. The line behind him began to grow. Other passengers noticed the tension. A few stepped out of line to listen. Some furrowed their brows, sensing something wasn't right. One woman, middle-aged, in business attire, watched closely. She'd caught the words, fallen soldier. Her expression changed from bored to confused, and then to disbelief. Quietly, she pulled out her phone and hit record. Meanwhile, the soldier made one last effort. He reached for his phone, called his supervisor at the base, and had him speak directly with the airline desk over the phone. Even then, nothing. Sorry, sir, the gate agent said again, with finality in her voice. It's out of my hands. And just like that, this soldier, who had traveled thousands of miles with the body of his closest friend, was told to wait. Like everyone else, that he didn't yell. He didn't protest. He didn't make a scene, but the pain in his eyes said everything. I'm just trying to do right by him, he said quietly, nodding toward the tarmac, where, underneath the belly of the plane, a flag-draped coffin rested in the cargo hold. This isn't about me. It's about him. Those words hung in the air. The woman filming put her hand over her mouth. Others nearby turned to look out the window, and then they saw it. The flag. The casket. Realization hit. Passengers began whispering. He's escorting a soldier. Wait, are they really making him wait? Is this even allowed? The mood shifted in the terminal. Where there had been normalcy, now there was unease. Discomfort. Embarrassment. The soldier stepped back, holding his papers, staring at the gate in disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Not after everything. Not after watching his best friend take his last breath in a desert far from home. He had done everything right, followed the rules, shown the documents, stayed calm. But instead of being allowed to carry out his duty with honor, he was standing there like a stranger, being treated like a disruption. And yet, through it all, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't blame anyone by name. He just stood tall, still, silent, proud, and slowly, those around him began to realize this wasn't just a boarding mistake. It was a moment of disrespect toward a man who could no longer speak for himself. What started as one gate agent's oversight was about to become something much, much bigger. A silent crowd watches, and then silence fell across the gate. The terminal, once filled with the familiar noise of travel, boarding calls, conversations, the hum of luggage wheels on tile, had gone quiet. It wasn't the kind of silence that demanded attention. It was the kind that settled heavily, uncomfortably. A silence born from watching something wrong unfold in real time and realizing it was your moment to either speak up or stay silent forever. The soldier stood alone at the gate. Documents in hand, orders in place. Calm but clearly wounded, not by the war he came from, but by the cold disregard he faced now that he didn't speak. He didn't argue. He simply stood, straight-backed, chest high, boots still. The way soldiers are trained to stand when they're witnessing something greater than themselves. The woman with the phone, still quietly recording, looked at her screen, her hands trembling. She hadn't meant to film a confrontation, but something about the soldier's restraint, his dignity, it broke her. She whispered to the person beside her, he's escorting a fallen soldier. They're not letting him board. And then, like ripples from a single stone dropped in still water, whispers began to spread. Wait, is that true? He's with a body? That's a military escort? They denied him pre-boarding? The energy shifted, not with anger at first, but with realization. Something sacred was happening in front of them, and no one had seen it. Until it was almost too late that a man in his 60s stood up. He wore a faded Vietnam veteran's cap. Without saying a word, he walked over to the gate agent. Then a woman in business attire followed. Then a young man with headphones pulled down around his neck. One by one, passengers began leaving their seats, not in panic, but in purpose. They formed a quiet, respectful line behind the soldier. Not loud, not chaotic, just human. They didn't shout. They didn't chant. They simply asked, "Why can't he board? Don't you see what he's doing? He's not asking for luxury. He's honoring the fallen." The woman filming finally stopped recording, but only to post the video. She uploaded it with a short caption. Airline refuses military escort boarding. He's bringing home a fallen soldier. This isn't okay. Within minutes, the video was spreading like wildfire. Social media picked it up instantly. Veterans, patriots, everyday travelers reposted the clip. Thousands of shares, likes, and comments flooded in. The hashtags started to trend. Hashtag honor the fallen. Hashtag let him board. Hashtag respect our soldiers. Back at the gate, the agent was still frozen. She hadn't meant to disrespect the military. She was just following standard boarding procedure. But now, those procedures had a face. And that face belonged to a man who had watched his best friend die. A man who had carried the weight of that loss across oceans and time zones. A man who had done everything right and was still being told to wait. Her hands trembled. She looked toward the security podium for help. Just then, a manager in a dark blue blazer rushed down the hallway. He had seen the video. He had gotten the call. And now he was here to fix it. Before the damage became irreversible, he didn't speak to the crowd. He walked straight to the soldier. "I'm so sorry," the manager said, eyes glistening with emotion. "We should have handled this differently. Please, come with me." The soldier looked down for a moment, his face unreadable. Then he gave a silent nod. The gate agent stepped aside, embarrassed. She didn't say a word. The manager personally escorted the soldier to the front of the line. He scanned his ticket and gently waved him through. "You're boarding first. And when we land, you'll be the first one off." The soldier didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply placed his hand over his heart, nodded once more, and walked slowly toward the jet bridge. As he disappeared down the tunnel, the passengers left behind didn't rush to board. No one reached for overhead luggage. No one pulled out a phone. They just stood there, still, silent. The silence wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was reverent. They had just witnessed a lesson in dignity, in duty, in love between brothers in arms. And every single person there knew they would never forget it. What happened next brought everyone to tears. The tension that had filled the gate moments earlier had shifted into something deeper, something sacred. People watched in silence, their hearts heavy, their eyes fixed on the soldier who had endured so much already, only to be denied the simple dignity his mission deserved. But then, like a sudden change in the wind, everything turned on. A man in a crisp airline blazer came rushing down the terminal. The look on his face said it all: urgency, regret, and something more, respect. It was the airline manager. He had just seen the video, just read the caption, just scrolled through the hundreds of comments pouring in like a flood of righteous anger. He didn't wait for instructions. He didn't call a meeting. He acted. He walked straight up to the soldier and stopped just inches from him. He didn't hide behind corporate words. He didn't offer a half-hearted excuse. He simply said, in a voice thick with emotion, "Sir, I'm sorry, deeply. We failed to recognize the honor you carry. On behalf of the airline, and as a fellow American, please, come with me." The terminal held its breath. The soldier gave a small nod, his eyes still focused and controlled, but the strain in his expression revealed everything he'd been holding in. Grief, frustration, fatigue. The manager gently motioned to the gate, and the crowd instinctively stepped aside, creating a silent path for the soldier. As he approached the boarding door, something unexpected happened. The pilot emerged from the cockpit. A tall, weathered man in his 50s, with silver hair beneath his cap and lines around his eyes that suggested years of flying through storms. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He stood tall and saluted. It wasn't for the man in uniform, but for the friend he carried. the one who couldn't walk on board himself. And as the soldier stepped onto the plane, the cabin, already filled with boarding passengers, stood up. One by one, aisle by aisle, every person rose to their feet. There was no clapping at first, just the sound of people rising in reverence, some placing their hands over their hearts, others bowing their heads. A quiet current of respect flowed through the fuselage like a blessing. Then, slowly, the applause began. It wasn't wild or loud. It wasn't showy. It was soft, rhythmic, full of gratitude. People clapped, not for a uniform, not for a company's mistake, but for honor, for sacrifice, for a hero returning home the only way he could. When the soldier took his seat, the flight attendants approached with quiet care. One offered him a bottle of water. Another placed a folded tissue gently on his tray table, just in case. No words were exchanged, just nods, just presence. Hours later, as the plane descended toward its final destination, the energy shifted. Again, the crew had made an announcement minutes before landing. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have on board a military escort bringing home a fallen soldier. We ask that you remain seated until the escort and the casket have been respectfully disembarked. No one moved. Not a single person. The landing was smooth. The taxiing felt slower than usual. Maybe because everyone on board was lost in thought, or maybe because they all knew this wasn't just another arrival. This was a final homecoming. As the plane came to a stop, the flight attendants opened the front door. The pilot stepped out once more and waited beside the exit. The soldier stood. The aisle cleared. He walked alone to the front of the plane, every eye following him, but not out of curiosity. Out of reverence, that he stepped onto the jet bridge, and, through the small windows, passengers caught a glimpse of what waited outside. There, on the tarmac, stood a military honor guard. An American flag flapped gently in the breeze. The cargo doors opened, and slowly, carefully, the flag-draped casket was lowered to the ground. Everyone on the plane remained standing. Every single one. Some wept silently. Others held hands. A few veterans among them saluted. No phones came out. No one spoke. Because in that moment, silence was the loudest way to say thank you. The respect that had been denied earlier, through red tape and indifference, was now overflowing. This wasn't just a soldier. This was someone's son, someone's best friend, a hero who had given everything. And this was his final welcome home. A final goodbye, and a powerful reminder. One man's quiet mission turned into a moment the world would never forget. By sunrise the next morning, something extraordinary had happened. The quiet moment captured at Gate 42, just a soldier trying to do the right thing, had exploded across the internet. The video uploaded by a single witness had now reached over 5 million views, and counting. It wasn't flashy. There were no edits, no music, no dramatic effects. Just truth. A man in uniform, a flag, a gate agent, and a heartbreaking delay that exposed something deeper about how we treat our heroes. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Morning shows played the video. Headlines appeared across every major platform. Airline denies military escort boarding. Crowd responds with unshakable respect. Silence on the plane as fallen soldier makes final journey home. One man's stand sparks nationwide reflection. Veterans groups from across the country spoke out. Some were angry. Others were heartbroken. But nearly all of them said the same thing. We've been through this before. The world forgets too easily. But today, someone remembered. The airline, flooded with calls, emails, and public outcry, quickly issued a formal apology. They admitted they got it wrong. They promised new training for every employee on how to handle military escorts with care, compassion, and dignity. They announced policy changes. They even began working with veteran organizations to ensure this never happened again. But for the soldier, whose name was never even mentioned in the video, it wasn't about going viral. It wasn't about headlines. It wasn't about revenge. That he didn't want attention. He didn't want praise. He wanted honor for the one man who couldn't ask for it himself, his best friend, his brother in arms, the man he carried across oceans, the man who died defending something most people only talk about, but never truly sacrifice for. And that mission had been fulfilled. When asked later about the video, the soldier simply said, "I didn't do anything special. I was just doing my duty. I promised I'd get him home, and I did." But the truth is, he did do something special. Because he reminded the world what honor actually looks like. It isn't loud. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to trend. Sometimes, honor is quiet. It shows up early. It follows the rules, even when the world doesn't. And it stands alone, until others realize they should have been standing beside it all along. That day, one man in uniform turned an ordinary airport terminal into something sacred. A place where strangers remembered what it means to respect the fallen. A place where silence said more than words ever could. And because he stood firm, thousands more stood with him. People across the country began sharing stories of their own. Stories of fathers and sons, of friends lost in combat, of moments when strangers showed kindness, and moments when they didn't. Suddenly, that simple video became something bigger. A mirror. It made people ask themselves, would I have noticed? Would I have stood up? Would I have shown respect, even when no one else did? And maybe, just maybe, it changed something. Airline staff across the nation started talking. New policies were circulated. More military escorts began to be treated not just as passengers, but as sacred duty bearers. The ripple effect had begun. But in the end, none of this would have happened if that one soldier hadn't kept his composure, hadn't stayed respectful, hadn't stood still and stayed true. Because true honor doesn't need an audience. It simply does what's right. Every single time. So today, let's remember that soldier. Let's remember the friend he brought home. Let's remember the silence on that plane, the standing crowd, the salute at the jet bridge. And most of all, let's carry this message forward. Sparkle's honor isn't a moment. It's a choice. And it lives on every time someone stands up for what's right, especially when they have every reason not to. Rest in peace to all who've served. You are not forgotten. We honor you. We remember you. We thank you. Movie Camera. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. For more real, powerful stories that remind us of what truly matters. Backhand index pointing right. Drop a United States in the comments if you stand with our fallen heroes.